in university, I did some like creative writing courses, and then wrote some poetry. I don't know if you know the poet. His name's Adam Dickinson. He's from St. Catharines, but his poetry has won different awards in Canada. He writes like the intersection of science and poetry. So I worked with him in my master's, and then he also helped me when it comes to some of the creative writing stuff. So I published some poetry here and there. Haven't in a number of years, but yeah, I've dabbled in some poetry before.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Ryan, just to welcome you formally into the our class. So Ryan's book just came out, The Stoic Teacher, and I got it last week actually in the mail. And so fabulous to see it. I was very happy to be a part of it. I actually did a blurb for the book and 5 tips, right, for the Stoic Mindful Teacher. So he's a high school teacher and college instructor. He earned his Master's of English Literature and Language from Brock University and is published in magazines such as Modern Stoicism and the University Affairs and Pace. So I was actually at Brock many years ago in 2013, and it was really a special week for me because I did a retreat with Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh. I don't know if in August. So it was in August 2013, and actually the next year he had his stroke. So he, you know, that was the last time that I did hear him speak once more, but that it was really special being on Brock. It's a beautiful campus by the Niagara Escarpment. And so anyway, so welcome. And I wanted to start off by asking you what got you interested into Stoicism and how it sort of affected you. And then I'll let you.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, oh, sorry, there's a bit of an echo. I don't know. All right, perfect. I think it's good.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, what got me into Stoicism? So when I was in university, I studied philosophy at times. So I'm an English major. I went to Teachers College and I did my master's in English. But what I noticed was, as much as I was studying like literature, I was also studying philosophy, literary theory. So I studied a lot of philosophy at university. My MA focused on trauma theory, psychoanalytic theory, and then eco-poetry. So I didn't study really any Stoicism in university. I think I mentioned in the book, like the only reference of it, I took a Shakespeare class. And I forget what character or which character they were talking about, but they mentioned, oh, this character is really stoic. And I don't even know what that even meant at the time, but or how they even were defining the word stoic, how the professor mentioned that. So other than that brief lecture, I had never heard of Stoicism. It was basically a couple of years into my teaching career. So I graduated in 2017, that a friend of mine actually introduced me to Stoicism. We were basically, I would say, reading at the time a lot of like self-help and literature in that category. And he just, I don't remember exactly how he did it. I mentioned in the book how at the time there were a lot of cuts being made to education under the provincial government. And I was getting really discouraged because I was saying, oh, I'm not going to have a job. I'll never break into this profession. My job is precarious. And he kind of just said something like, why don't you just focus right now on those things you can control, such as bettering yourself as a teacher, trying to find those job opportunities when they do come up, instead of just being preoccupied all the time with those things outside of your control, like what the government's going to do. So I took that approach and it did stick with me. And then later on, I'm kind of like, so I know I've heard of this general kind of technique, but I'm just curious, where did you get that from? And he mentioned, well, I've been reading some Stoic philosophy. And when I first heard of Stoic philosophy, I thought, oh, it means like not showing emotion. I guess that's the kind of popular misconception about Stoicism. So I thought, I'm not going to, waste my time on that. And then he kind of got a little bit more into it. He was actually exploring it for the first time as well. And he introduced me to a couple texts. One of them, I have this book right here. I don't know if you can see that. It's A Guide to the Good Life, The Ancient Art of Stoic Joy by William B. Irvine.
Yes.
And it's a really good, I think, introductory book on Stoicism, because he not only lays out some of the history of Stoicism, but as well lays out some just the worldview of Stoicism, and as well as some tools. Like each of the chapters are different Stoic tools you could use that relate to things like, I know your course is on discipline, relate to basically broad questions related to what it means to live a good life. So I've got into that. I really liked the book, and that kind of propelled me to read some other stuff. I went into other secondary texts like Donald Robertson's, and then even other ones that are a little bit less known. And then I got more to the primary texts last, like Marcus Aurelius's Meditations was my first one. Read some Epictetus, some of Seneca's essays. And yeah, it stuck. And it really, I think at the time when I was really struggling with a couple of things. First thing, I was struggling with creating an identity for myself outside of university. That took me a few years. I actually wrote an essay about that in University Affairs, about like trying to figure out who am I outside of school. I mean, I'm still working in school as a teacher, but outside of student life. And Stoicism kind of helped me with that, as well as just dealing with the stresses of my job when it comes to trying to find permanent work at the time, and as well as just dealing with students on a daily basis. So Stoicism really helped me in some of the tools that were mentioned in these different secondary texts. And yeah, it just stuck. And I think the thing I liked about it was in university, I was studying philosophy, and philosophy, it was presented to me as something very abstract. Like you had to use all these kind of buzzwords. I remember studying thinkers like, Foucault and Deleuze and Guattari, and these very kind of abstract thinkers. So very interesting, but you had to use the language to kind of feel like you were contributing in seminar. And at times I was talking about some very abstract issues that didn't directly impact me. And then when I read Stoicism, and it was really my first introduction to more of the ancient philosophy, I realized, well, these ancient thinkers are talking about like what it means to be human and what it means to live a good life. And I really liked that because that was very applicable, even though it was, a long time ago. It was something that directly impacted my life. And so it really helped redefine philosophy for me, and think it's not just for academia, and it's for everyday people. And that's what I really like about the ancients, because they were, especially the Stoics, they were philosophers of the everyday people. So that's how I kind of got into it. Of course, like once I got into Stoicism, I got more into like other thinkers, like even more Eastern thinkers. And so I've been exploring a whole bunch of things outside of Stoicism recently, but still I always find myself gravitating back towards the Stoics. And the great thing is, I think like not a big criticism, but some people say, when you read something like the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, I'm not sure if any of you have had to read it for your course or outside of your course, it's very like repetitive, right? And they think like, oh no, like when you read philosophy, it should be very logical and lay out this argument. But I really like that because it gives you those constant reminders of what it means to live a good life. And you don't have to agree with everything, but I really do appreciate it. It's a very kind of different way of writing. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I got into it. And I always kind of find myself going back to it at times, and going back to different texts, and kind of, dipping my toe into some of them. So, yeah, that's kind of my journey into Stoicism.
Mm-hmm. And your book actually has really good end of chapter reflection questions for journaling. And I really enjoyed that, and, dealing with all the different aspects. Ryan, do you want to say something specifically on just Stoicism and discipline, and, and how that has helped you, some of the principles, and, get going. Writing a book and going from start to finish is not easy. And especially with a full-time job. And so, yeah, I'd be happy to hear your thoughts.
For sure, yeah. And maybe just before talking about the Stoicism and discipline, maybe I'll just allude to the fact of why I wrote this book on Stoicism and teaching, because we kind of hinted at that. So I work in a setting. Now I mentioned to Ranjini, I am transferring to what's called a regular ed high school. But the last 2.5 years, I've been working in what's called an alternative education setting. So it's a school within the public system. Every school board in Ontario has one. It's called an alternative education school. And what it is it's a school made for students who are more at risk. So they might have been suspended, expelled, non-attenders at their high school. So they come to my class, and we have a few teachers working at the school. We're a small site, and we have to try to teach these students not only academics, but like life skills as well. So as you can imagine, it's fairly stressful because you have a lot of students who are just naturally defiant. Like they might come with ODD, oppositional defiant disorder, or any other host of different learning disabilities, and they can make your life really difficult. And so kind of linking to, me getting into Stoicism as well, I found that when I first started this job, I was coming home every day with a very kind of cynical view of my job, thinking, oh, this student called me this, or they're not listening in class. I must be a failure of a teacher. Teaching's not for me. All students are like this. All students are lazy or cynical. And I realized I didn't really have a toolkit to refer to and to tap into in order to keep me resilient throughout the entire semester, and basically kind of going back to discipline to make me want to come in every day motivated. So I was reading Stoicism, which was helping me out in my personal life. And then I was kind of leaving it at the door when I entered the classroom, and going through the motions and just feeling exhausted at the end of the day, and feeling like I should just, transfer out or take a bunch of sick days because I can't deal with the stress. And then I realized, why don't I actually apply some of those teachings to my actual job and, directly do that. So I started to do little things like journaling before the school day. And I would do something the Stoics talk about, like anticipating kind of adversity. And I would write that in my journal. I'd write the date. I'd write one thing that I'm grateful for the day. It could have been as easy as I woke up in the morning and I'm healthy, or hey, I get to go to a job that I'm paid for and that I think is of value in society. And so I would do my little gratitude, and then I would anticipate some of the adversity I was going to face. So I'd say, I think so-and-so, they responded this way yesterday, so I should probably anticipate that we're going to respond that same way. Or I'm getting this new student in the class, and hey, there's a good chance, because I've read their kind of documents, that it might be a difficult time. And so I started anticipating these difficulties, and it didn't make them go away. Like, they still happened in the class, but I felt a bit more prepared when I was in those situations. And then I could actually reflect in my journal in terms of, when this happens, I will then maybe resort to this. So it was more of a planned preventative approach, rather than just putting out fires all day. So that was, one little method I used, and I started incorporating more and more methods within my teaching day. And then I thought to myself, like, I really like this. I wonder if anyone's writing about this topic. So I looked online, and a lot out there in terms of teacher burnout, teacher mental health, teacher self-care, which is all really important. But there was nothing in terms of, okay, it's important to take care of yourself, and maybe, not take on all these obligations and create time for self-care outside of teaching. But then what happens when you're actually in the moment and you actually have to deal with these stresses? You can't just run away. You're going to have to deal with them. So then I thought, in my research, I found no one was really talking about this. Like, what are some actual kind of, I call them mental hacks, but what are some tools you could use on the spot or around the teaching day that'll help your day maybe go a little bit more smoothly? So that's when I started just kind of piecing it together. And then I ended up writing it. It is a rather short book, but I intentionally wrote it to be short, because I know teachers don't have a lot of time. So if I were to give them, a 300-page book and done to the history of Stoicism, and teachers wouldn't want to read it. They want something nice, short, precise. I read a book on teacher self-care published by the same publisher I did, Patrice Palmer. And I liked it because it was like 100 pages, right to the point. and I could read it in a couple sittings, and then I could apply what she was saying to my own life. So I intentionally kept this short. It took me about a little over a year to do, but I was dabbling in terms of figuring out like, okay, I like this idea. So what am I going to do? I'm going to write like an essay and try to publish. Am I going to do like a short little book? What am I going to do? And then eventually I settled on the book, which took discipline because what I had to do, and maybe you've heard this from different people who have written, or maybe some of you are writers, you really have to put in effort every single day. You can't just write, one day for, 30 minutes and drop it and come back a month from now. You're not going to build that momentum to continue to want to write. So every morning I was very intentional. I would do my journaling. I'd actually go to school really early. I'd make myself a coffee. I'd do my journaling. I'd do a little bit of reading to motivate myself. Whatever I was reading, could have been Stoicism, something else. And then I would get to saying, I'm going to write 30 minutes a day. That's my routine. I made it every weekday, so I gave myself weekends off. And that was my routine. Before the school day, before a certain time, I had to get my writing in. And then wherever I finished off, whenever that 30 minutes finished, that's when I finished off. I didn't try to force more. I didn't try to do anything else. I thought that's when the timer is going to run out. Even if I was on a roll, I said, okay, I'll put that idea down for tomorrow, and then I'll continue tomorrow. So I built that routine early on, and that really helped me, especially not just for the initial draft, but continually going back. I had to like rewrite maybe 7 edits, going back and forth. And some of them was me just going back and rereading and telling the publisher, actually, I'm thinking of changing this. And so I'd have to go back again, those 30-minute increments, and continuing to reread and changing words here and there. So just building that routine in the morning really helped. And I think for those who want to write, or those who do write and sometimes struggle with, I guess, what's called like writer's block, you really got to reflect on what time of day I think works for you. So for me, the mornings worked best. I would never be able to write in the evenings. I can't do that. Even reading, I don't like reading in the evenings. I like doing it all in the morning. I find it's my little kind of ritual I have to go through, and then I'm ready for the day. So yeah, that's how I kind of kept that accountability. I did hit some roadblocks along the way in terms of, I sent this out to a few publishers. A lot of them, what they said was they loved the idea of, these mind hacks for teachers, no one doing this topic, but they said, it's too old. No one's going to know what Stoicism is. People want new and innovative. And so I was kind of arguing, well, these ideas, though they're old, I think they're timeless and they apply to everyone. But a lot of them said, no, we want you to kind of, especially one kind of bigger publisher said, we'll go with your book, but you have to rewrite the entire approach. Take out the Stoic approach and put kind of these modern celebrities and talk about how they use these practices. I'm kind of like, yeah, but I don't really want to, change that component. So I kind of decided not to go with them. And then luckily I found a publisher, small independent publisher in the States, who was into the idea. And I, met them a few times and kind of explained it, pitched the idea. They went with it and they believed in the idea. They believed in keeping Stoicism within, even the title, let alone being one of the framing parts of the book. And so a lot of discipline in terms of not just having to write it, but having to persevere when you get all those either rejections or people who are like, yeah, I like it, but you should change this. And I really want to stay true to the whole Stoic approach and keep that in the book. So I had to just continue to persevere and think someone's going to take it, someone's going to believe in that idea. And eventually I found that in Alphabet Publishing.
That's an exciting story. And so you had the discipline to actually make it to the school early every weekday.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea that, I don't know if you've read Oliver Burkeman's 4,000 Weeks. And he actually brings up the same idea that of having a fixed time, and it doesn't have to be that long, and stopping when that time ends, and not getting anxious when you're in flow that, oh, if I stop, I'm going to lose my flow. Which works for a lot of writers, like Flannery O'Connor, who's one of my favorites, wrote every day for just 2 hours. Graham Greene did 300 words a day. So that idea of consistency from beginning to end, yeah.
And 30 minutes is not, a huge commitment because, there's times where I'm not writing during the whole 30 minutes. I'm thinking about something. And then maybe part of that 30 minutes is I think of an idea, I go online and read a little article, and I'm like, oh, I like this sentence in this article. I'm just going to take that sentence, pop it into my, writing document, and just ponder it for a little while and think about how this will, help extend this idea. So sometimes, most of the time, I'm not just writing away for that entire 30 minutes. It could be brainstorming. I just thought, I'm just going to work on this project for 30 minutes a day, whatever that looks like. And whether I'm feeling great and I have more to give, I'm going to cut myself off, put whatever I was thinking of, save it to the next day so it motivates me for the next day. Or if I had nothing, it was just one of those days I just felt not being productive, I thought, well, you know what? I tried, I gave it 30 minutes, and time to move on. We'll try fresh the next day. So yeah, it wasn't always like the perfect 30 minutes, whatever that's supposed to mean. But, I just told myself 30 minutes, that's my routine. And it felt kind of wrong if I didn't put in that time. A couple of times based on whatever circumstance, I missed that time, and I felt like something was missing. Like I just felt like just awkward throughout the day. Like I didn't put in my writing. Once you build that routine, it's almost like working out, right? Once you work out every single day, you miss a day, you feel like you're missing something. Like you got to go and work out. So I felt that same way with writing.
Mm-hmm. So what time did you head to the school?
I would head to the school. It's funny because the caretaker would be there early, probably about 6:30 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
We start school at 9:30. So again, I'd make it a bit of a routine. I'd get there, I'd see the caretaker, say hi to her. I'd be the only teaching staff in the building, make my coffee, go to my desk. Again, I'd do my journaling just to start writing, right? I know it wasn't about necessarily what the book was about. Well, some of it was, but it was my own kind of process for the day. Then I'd do a bit of reading to just kind of inspire me. And then I'd get to writing for that time. And then after that, I would spend the rest of the morning prepping for like my lesson, like going over what I had to do for the day for my class. And that's how things went for that period of time.
Yeah, that's a great structure. Did you have a vision for the entire book when you started, or was it something that, did you know what chapters you were going to have, or did you discover that as you went along?
Some of them I knew. Like I knew I looked at what a lot of secondary sources and different books about Stoicism, what approaches they use. A lot of them started with kind of a brief overview of Stoicism / history. So I'm like, I should probably do that as well. I wanted to start with something like, so just a general thoughts on why Stoicism is relevant for teachers. So I did a little brief kind of preface on that. And then I thought I want each chapter to be like a little tool that teachers could use. So that was my approach. And then I thought at the end, okay, like what else can I do? Because I had this, I wanted to add something else. So then I thought, well, how about one could be, because teachers love learning about like professional resources. So I thought I'll do a chapter on just some resources that they could check out, because I didn't get into in-depth history of Stoicism or anything like that. Or if they want to get involved in the Stoic community, I gave them certain resources like some websites and things. So I did a chapter on that. Then I really liked the idea because I read a book called The Tao of Teaching. It's a book that came out in the 90s. And in the book, it's someone who, similar to what I do in the book, except she talks about how Taoism, the teachings of Taoism, can actually help teachers. So each, at the end of each chapter, there's a little case study or a little narrative from a teacher, and they talk about how it impacts their life. So I thought, I wonder if I could kind of gather and get in contact with different educators who maybe use Stoicism and get them to write a little blurb for a chapter. And that's when I reached out to you and others who I've known, and even did some research myself to find out who's maybe who's a teacher who also writes about Stoicism. And surprisingly, I got a lot of people who said, who agreed to do it. So I gathered that up, put that into a chapter kind of near the end to show that, hey, it's not just me talking about this subject. Others use it in their own way. So yeah, I thought it was an interesting way to incorporate a chapter. And so yeah, that's kind of how the approach went. I had that initial idea of the intro chapter on Stoicism, the tools, and then later on I decided to add the chapter on like resources you could check out, as well as the different narratives from the educators who use Stoicism.
So who's your favorite Stoic and why?
I would say probably Marcus Aurelius. And I say this, I mean, I think it's pretty cool. Has your class read like the Meditations?
Not in this one, but we do read it in another one. There he is, Marcus.
Yeah. So, you know, what's cool about him, for those who don't know, Roman emperor, and the book itself, it wasn't meant to be published. So it was his own kind of personal journal that he wrote to himself. And that's why a lot of people say, oh, like, why are there repetitive parts to it? Well, it's his own journal, right? And when you're journaling, I'm sure there's repetitive, you know, issues and themes that come up. So, you know, you're reading this kind of personal diary from a Roman emperor. And a lot of times when people think of Roman emperor, they think of like, oh, here's this, you know, evil emperor, corrupt emperor. Well, no, Marcus Aurelius wasn't. And so you're reading this personal diary by him. And just what I like about it is he talks so much about, you know, the human condition, talks about the importance of, you know, kind of creating your own morning routine, having a philosophy of life to follow, talks about being grateful for criticism, not obsessing over praise, embracing hardship, you know, journaling, because kind of that's what he's doing, humbleness. You know, I even really like how he starts the beginning of the Meditations after he kind of thanks all these people. He talks about the importance of, you know, when you get up, kind of like what I was doing with the embracing adversity or expecting adversity. He says, you know, just expect that a lot of people are going to be mean and are going to cause problems for you. And that's just part of life. And not that, you know, you can't be upset over this, but just be aware of this. And it's a normal part of life. And we have to find ways to persevere. So I really connected with it because it just spoke so much to my situation at the time. And again, I just thought it was just so unique because of his high-ranking position. He was just so human. And yeah, I think Marcus Aurelius would be my favorite. I mean, they're all very interesting, right? You have Epictetus, who was a slave. You have Seneca, who had to deal with the Emperor Nero. So all these very stressful situations, and, you know, they were all flawed humans, of course, but I just thought how they spoke about the human condition was just so profound. And again, what's really cool is it's very applicable to today. It's not something you pick up and you're like, oh, well, you know what? Most of what's being said here is, you know, relevant to that historical period. No, you know, it's very applicable today. And, you know, I'm not sure if people know, but, you know, things like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, you know, even ACT, like acceptance and commitment therapy, when I'm, you know, reading texts by that, when I'm talking to the social workers at my work and they're talking about these therapies, I'm like, actually, you know, a lot of what Marcus Aurelius was saying and the other Stoics, you know, that's really relevant to what, you know, the principles of these, you know, new modern therapies. So I really think it's really cool how they stood the test of time. So yeah, I would say Marcus Aurelius would be my favorite. And I just think his is, especially for those who just want to get into Stoicism for the first time and read these texts, I would say, some people say go to Epictetus first because it's, you know, there's different fragments, go to Seneca. I would say start at Marcus Aurelius, just because, I don't know, I found it was the most approachable out of the three. And, you know, see if you like it, read some of it, put it down, go back to it. You know, it's, don't think it necessarily has to be, you know, read all in one sitting. You know, it's something you can just kind of bounce back to every single day and read a couple paragraphs and, you know, meditate on it and just think, okay, how is this applicable to my own life? Or how is this not applicable? And I think there's a lot of, you know, fruitful ideas in the meditations.
Great. So Ryan, is there anything you want to add that we haven't touched upon before I open it up to questions?
I'm trying to think. I mean, I think the great thing about Stoicism is it's, and even I mentioned this in the book, is that you don't have to agree with everything. Like there's principles I don't agree with within Stoicism. The good thing is it's not necessarily like a religion, right? Where it's just like you have to, you know, believe in all of the doctrine, or at least those who are devout believe in all the doctrine. You could choose certain things that work. You could think this idea just is not applicable to my life, or is not relevant to the 21st century, and I won't worry about it. It's all about building your own toolkit and worldview. And my worldview is very much composed of principles of Stoicism. There's other things I like things in Zen. There's things all over the place that I like, that I take. And a lot of times I'm changing as well. Like sometimes something will be applicable to my life, and then I realize it's not really applicable. I'll drop it, go to something new. So that's the thing I like about it. It's a philosophy that you don't have to embrace everything that everyone said, all the Stoics said. You could always just, pick and choose and figure out what works for you. And something might not work for you, and 2 years from now might work for you very well. So, that's why I like it. Again, it's not a religion. It's just, a worldview. I look at it, or a philosophy of life. I really like thinking of it as a philosophy of life. But again, doesn't mean you have to agree with everything that's said by these thinkers. So,
yeah, great, thank you. So, questions? Anyone has questions? And I want to add that even if you're not a teacher, this is really a wonderful book to read.